lot's been going on. A lot of people are quoting uncertainty when it comes to the talks about tariffs. What do you feel about the Trump administration's moves?
Well, this is the biggest tariff increase that we've had in 80 years. And in fact, even with the lowering of the reciprocal tariffs the other day, we're still at the highest tariff levels since the Great Depression. So this is a major shock to the economy.
Now, you have a background in international relations. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes, so I've studied international relations and taught at Drake since 1989. I've spent 2 years living and working in China, and I've traveled there many other times, so that's been a focal point of my studies.
What would you say is the key to trade relations? Is it a partnership? Is it being equal? What is it?
Well, the key for those who are engaged in trade, who are, of course are private business people, is a win-win proposition that both sides gain something from the exchange. The problem now with U.S. relations with China is that our trade is lopsided. China sells us about 3 times as much as we sell them, so we have a big trade imbalance, and I think that is part of the issue with China.
You talk about trade imbalance. Put in perspective for the viewers at home just how much trade that we do with China. What does the imbalance look like?
We import about a little over $400 billion a year in goods from China, much of it in manufactured goods. In fact, China accounts for 1/3 of all of the manufactured goods produced in the world. On the other hand, we sell about $140, $150 billion to China, and a good part of that is made up of agricultural exports like soybeans and pork.
What do you think it's going to take for people to feel more certainty in this economic climate?
Well, I think the crucial thing is business likes to know what the rules are, and unfortunately, the way that the tariffs have been rolled out is that it's changed a lot, right? There have been announcements one day and then taken back the next day. Even now, we're waiting to see what happens 90 days from now when whether the reciprocal tariffs will come back on or not. And of course, there are negotiations that will be taking place between governments during that time to see if deals can be struck. So business is looking for certainty. They want the rules to be set. They want to know what the tariff rates are going to be, and then they can adjust accordingly.
Talk to me a little bit about those reciprocal tariffs. Obviously, we have that 90-day pause. Why do you think the Trump administration walked back his initial proposal?
Well, part of it was that the stock market reacted so negatively, but even more so, the bond market. When the bond market begins to collapse, then interest rates rise, and that can lead to the kind of economic consequences we saw with the financial crisis in 2008. I think it was the reaction of the bond market that really caught the attention of President Trump and that led to the decision to pull back for now.
And as we saw in the stock markets, Wall Street buzzing, we saw an incline yesterday, some improvement, I should say. Do you believe in the 90 days we will continue to see improvement, or maybe closer to the end of the 90 days will we see that same type of fear?
Really, it depends on what kind of negotiations go on in the meantime. So the European Union has also pulled back on the 25% tariffs that it had imposed on the United States. So it's basically an invitation to negotiate, and now we'll see whether deals can be struck in the meantime. One of the uncertainties is exactly what the Trump administration will be looking for, what kind of asks will it make of other countries, and it's been sort of uncertain to this point.
Walk me through a little bit of our history with China, our relationship in regard to trade.
Well, during the first Trump administration, the United States raised tariffs on Chinese exports to the United States substantially. That led to negotiations, a so-called Phase 1 trade deal that was supposed to lead then to a Phase 2 trade deal. The first Phase 1 trade deal, we saw a commitment by China to import more American goods, up to $200 billion. Unfortunately, that never really came to pass, partly because of COVID. The Chinese never fulfilled the commitments that they made, and the Phase 2 trade deal never came about. But it did suggest that deals can be struck. There were negotiations, there was an agreement, even though it didn't end up with the results that both sides had expected.
So it's fair to say that they were maybe not on the same page, but traveling in the same direction.
At least willing to deal with one another, yes.
So what do you think was the key change? Or was it the reciprocal tariffs, or what do you think led us to where we are now?
Well, I think that the Trump administration sees tariffs as playing several roles. They've talked about tariffs as a negotiating tactic in order to get other countries to make concessions to us on things that concern us. They've talked about tariffs as a means of raising revenue, and they've talked about tariffs as a way to incentivize corporations to move their manufacturing to the United States to avoid tariffs. However, those three things are not necessarily complementary to one another. For instance, if you're going to use tariffs as a way to raise revenue, then you can't bargain them away in deals with other countries. So it'll be interesting to see what the Trump administration's priorities are with respect to these differing goals or objectives.
A lot of viewers and just constituents, they've expressed feelings of Trump not really knowing what tariffs are, to the point of not really knowing the impacts that would follow because of the tariffs that he put in place. Do you believe there's any validity to that?
So the president's talked about tariffs as something that the exporters pay, the other countries pay. In fact, it's the importers, whoever's importing the goods to the United States, who pay the tariffs. And then the question is, do they pass them along to consumers? And of course, from their perspective, most of the time they feel they need to pass along the tariffs, and so consumers do end up paying the tariffs. So I think that's a misconception. The other is that the president sees trade balances with individual countries as evidence that other countries are cheating us somehow. Economists don't agree with that perspective. Countries have different specializations. We import more from some countries, export more to other countries. And so the individual trade balances aren't really evidence that countries are cheating necessarily. The overall trade imbalance that we have with the world as a whole is really a fact, comes down to the fact that we consume more than other countries, and American consumption, even though we're only about 4% of the world's population, we consume about 30% of overall global consumption. So we're a consumption-heavy country, and that means that we import more than we export.
Everybody has coined this the beginning of a trade war, if not in a trade war, specifically with China. What can that mean if things go further? Say China doesn't want to work with us. He doesn't want to sit down with President Trump and sort out a deal. What can consumers expect?
Well, you can expect maybe a $3,000 iPhone, for instance. You can expect prices to go up. A lot of the goods that we don't only import final goods from China, but a lot of the parts from China that are central to things that are made here in the United States, but the parts come from China. And there are many goods that we simply don't produce here, and China is the dominant manufacturer, and so we can't easily or quickly replace them. Over time, if tariffs remain high on China but lower on other countries, then manufacturing might drift to Vietnam or the Philippines or other countries. But many kinds of manufacturing really aren't well suited for the United States anymore. We simply are too high wage a country to support many kinds of manufacturing. I think more important is whether the high value added manufacturing is located here. And there are other ways besides tariffs to encourage that. The Biden administration, for instance, used subsidies and research incentives to try to move semiconductor industry to the United States, which I think is a more targeted approach.
From your perspective, do you feel a lot of people are kind of holding off on making these big purchases? They're, feeling a little more scared to, even buy a lot more groceries than they probably would be. What's your message? Tariffs are ever changing. This isn't our first time. I mean, this is one of the most drastic, as you stated, but this isn't the first time where we've had uncertainty with tariffs. So how do they move forward knowing that the uncertainty exists?
Well, we know that consumer confidence has dropped dramatically in the last month or so. And people, if you ask people what they expect as far as inflation, they expect it to rise. And so that affects their consumer behavior. So if you think that something's going to be expensive in the future, then you might want to purchase it now. On the other hand, if you think the economy is going to go into recession, then you might want to put off making big purchases because you're not sure about whether your job will be there. So we're kind of in an interesting or difficult situation because economists are telling us we could have higher prices and higher unemployment. Usually it's one or the other. Either prices are low but you have higher unemployment, or prices are going up and unemployment declines. But now what's called stagflation is a possibility. So we'll just have to see.
If you could be an influence on President Trump about tariffs, what would be your message? What would you want him to consider?
Well, I would suggest that we adopt a more targeted approach to focus on particular industries that we think are crucial to our national security or to our economic well-being, and use limited tariffs in concert with other kinds of things like tax policy and subsidy policy and research and development support to try to shape where our economy needs to grow. The administration, in my view, is leaning too heavily on tariffs as our single tool.
And is there anything that people at home need to know that I didn't ask you previously?
Just that the impact of raising tariffs like this is not just economic, but it's also political. That it really damages our reputation around the world and our political relationships with other countries, and that can spill over into other foreign policy issues.